What is up? This here, LA in a minute, and I'm here in Hollywood at Musso Frank Grill, one of my favorite dining experiences in LA, and also a place that's been open since 1919, which makes it one of the oldest restaurants in LA and one of the most iconic. So I want to talk about the history of Musso Frank Grill. Let's get into it. So the restaurant opened on September 27th, 1919, and it was originally known as Frank's Cafe, or more formally, Francois. There were two founders of Frank's Cafe. The first was Francois Toulet and his father-in-law, Robert Pratchak, who had a French-Italian restaurant downtown called Campy's. When Frank's opened, the center of Los Angeles, both socially and culturally, was still in downtown. However, as the motion picture industry began to gain a foothold, the power center was gradually moving west towards Hollywood. Toulet and Pratchett created a restaurant that would appeal to both the bohemian and the intellectual clientele with high ceilings, wood paneling, and red booths. Frank's Cafe was doing brisk business, but by 1925, they were looking for new investors. Enter restaurateur Joseph Musso from Portland, who bought an ownership share and changed the name of the restaurant. He renamed it Musso Frank's Grill, perfect timing because Hollywood was just entering its golden era. But within 2 years, Frank and Musso actually sold the restaurant to two Italian immigrants, Joseph Carissimi and Giovanni Masso, a car expert who had worked for Fiat and was no relation to Musso. Now, the original Musso would go on to open a few restaurants, Wilshire Cafe, Musso's Parisian Garden Cafe, and Musso's Nightclub, all of which had varying degrees of success, but not the staying power of Musso and Frank's. Fueling that success was the fact that the Screenwriters Guild was right across the street from Musso and Frank's. Famous novelists had been hired as screenwriters in the 20s and 30s, and legends such as Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Raymond Chandler became regulars. In addition, the Stanley Rose Bookshop was an adjoining building to the east, and that was a magnet for screenwriters, novelists, and other luminaries of the page. Musso and Frank's was so popular amongst those in the silver screen that they opened up a VIP back room for film industry clientele, which brought even further A-list stars such as Charlie Chaplin, Frank Sinatra and Lauren Bacall, and Marilyn Monroe, along with Joe DiMaggio, amongst others. Musso and Frank's was such the place to be that Charles Bukowski, a regular himself, said that Musso and Frank's became the place to go even for aspiring A-listers because they wanted to emulate their role models. The restaurant's popularity continued throughout the 60s and 70s, and even today as heavyweights such as Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones and Johnny Depp are still counted amongst the regulars. But you can't get into Musso and Frank's without discussing the true legends, like Mario, who's been there for 34 years, or Juan, who's been there since 1970, 53 years, or Luis, who's been slanging their martinis for 58 years. These guys are as much of an institution as Musso and Frank's itself. And speaking of the martini, it was crafted to perfection by Manny Aguirre, who had also been there for more than 40 years and has some special rules that he handed down to craft masters that would follow. And that martini that Manny crafted perfectly for Musso and Frank, those are some strict rules. Has to use ice only made from filtered water, stirred, not shaken, and stirred 12 times to be precise. No vermouth, as that can alter the flavor, and the olives are house cured. It's also served in a 2.5-ounce glass, so they can serve it with a sidecar with those little pellets of ice to make sure it remains ice cold. It's delicious. So 100 years in one of the most iconic restaurants in all of Los Angeles. That's Musso and Frank's. All right, LA, it's been a minute.